Welcome in, everybody. This is the Week 3 Adjusted Line Play Report brought to you by Zilla Fantasy Elite. I am your host, Todd Hoffman. You can find myself over on Twitter at ToddZilla1337. You can find Zilla Fantasy Elite on Twitter at Zilla Fantasy. Go ahead over on Twitter, find us, and give us a follow. Get all the latest breaking fantasy football news, dynasty news, and DFS stuff on those two social media accounts. So go ahead and give them a follow. Before we get underway with the Week 3 slate, just want to apologize for saying I'm not going to have a lot of Derrick Henry in my DFS lineups for Week 2. Pretty much if you listen to any DFS podcast last week, they were saying the same thing. Fade Derrick Henry. Not going to have him in a ton of lineups as he didn't project to get a lot of volume rushing-wise, and he's never been one to get receiving work. But here we are, 50 DK points later, crushed the slate, and anybody who had them in their lineup pretty much won money. So sorry about that on the Week 2. Hopefully the Week 3 is a little bit more accurate. So let's get that underway. And actually, before we do, I just want to give an alert to anybody who watches this. I had cancer about 5 years ago. I'm actually in the middle of battling it again. So I have a surgery that's scheduled for next week. And all things going well, I should still be able to get out a Week 4 DFS show. But in case that doesn't come out, the worst has happened during my surgery, and just be aware of that. So Week 4 might be a little bit of a struggle, or it might come out a little bit later, depending on how I'm recovering from my surgery next week. So just keep that in mind, and hopefully everything goes well and we can win some money here throughout the week, throughout the NFL season doing this DFS stuff. And with that news out of the way, let's get into the Week 3 slate. We actually last week had a bunch of games over 50, which was rare. Well, once again, we have 4 games actually over 50, and 2 of them, the highest ones on the slate, are at 55.5 points. That's the Chargers and Kansas City, as you can see here right in the middle. Los Angeles Chargers at Kansas City. They're sitting at 55.5 points. The Minnesota and Seattle game also is a late game this week. 55.5 points there. We have Tampa Bay at Los Angeles Rams at 55 points. And then the Arizona-Jacksonville game, which is probably a sneaky one, and we'll get to it as we go through, but that's at 52. So again, we have 4 games over 50 this week. Seems like there might be some better plays, though, this week as far as being able to stack people appropriately in the game. So keep that in mind as we go through there. And there's a few more at like 49.5 and 48. So there's some pretty high totals this week. As always, we're going to start with the highest game totals and then kind of work our way down. So let's get that underway. First things first, we'll go over the Los Angeles at Kansas City Chargers game. Kansas City is favored by 6.5 points there with that 55.5 point total. And we'll go with the away team here for every matchup first. First is the Los Angeles Chargers, and we can see on offense their pass protection's at a 9 here, and the defensive pass rush for Kansas City is not that good. It's at 22. This is one of those green-red matchups, which is kind of the whole point of the adjusted line play report, is to find these mismatches within the trenches, and as the trenches go, a lot of times the games go, and if you can predict what's going to go on in the trenches, you can predict what goes on in the game and kind of get what the game is going to play out like. So with that being said, Los Angeles Chargers offensive pass protection, it's green at 9, Kansas City pass rush at 22. I would expect the Chargers to have plenty of time passing the ball. And actually, if you look at the run blocking, they're 13th in offensive run blocking, so they're middle of the road. But Kansas City is 31st in the adjusted line yards on defense there, so they're second to the worst as far as giving up yards in the rushing game. So with that being said, the pass protection should be good, and they should also be able to move the ball efficiently on the ground. This could be another solid week for Eckler, as he did pretty well last week under the same conditions. But with the Chargers having time to throw, I expect Kansas City, we'll get into them next, but I expect Kansas City obviously to put up points here. So the Chargers should be able to hopefully keep pace here, or at least be able to score on Kansas City pretty well. So with that being said, Herbert's obviously in play here. If there's going to have a lot of time to pass the ball, Herbert's going to be in play. And then the pass catchers, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, would be the main guys, especially Mike Williams. He's already balled out in 2 straight weeks. He's probably going to be a little bit more popular now that he has done so well in those first 2 weeks. But if he's got time to throw there, Mike Williams is a guy that, not necessarily an elite route runner. He just wins at the point of attack and downfield. So you're going to have a little bit more time to pass, a little bit more time to get the ball to Mike Williams. He can make plays. And those were the 2 that I would kind of go. If I'm going to go Herbert route, you can get Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. And then again, if he's going to have a little bit extra time, and especially if this turns into a track meet, I would expect Jalen Guyton. I know last week I mentioned him as somebody that's always disappointed, and he did last week. I think he had 1 catch, not for very many yards. But Guyton's one of those guys. He scores really deep. He gets tons of air yards. And if this does turn into a track meet or a shootout, he could easily get one of those long bombs, if not 2 in this game. So if you want to get a little bit different, pretty much everyone's going to be attacking this game. Chargers, Kansas City, everybody knows their weapons. Everybody knows their kind of high-scoring offense. Everybody loves to get involved with Kansas City. I expect Kansas City with such a high total to come in very high rostered, even in GPPs. So a way to get different is maybe to stack up that Chargers lineup. And getting Eckler might get you a little bit different, but if you're going to put Herbert in there, double stacking him with either Keenan Allen or Mike Williams, and then a Jalen Guyton, and hoping most of the touchdowns go there. You could also throw in a Jared Cook to get a little bit different. He could be a way to pivot off of the vast amount of people that are getting Kelsey within this matchup, and still get a piece of this 55.5 point matchup. With that being said, let's move on to Kansas City. Their run blocking is bad. We can see it's 29th, although the Chargers are 27th in the adjusted line yards on defense against the run, so that's kind of a wash. I expect Kansas City to be able to move the ball a little bit better on the ground than they have in the first 2 weeks. With that being said, Kansas City's pass protection 11, the Chargers 17th on the pass rush. It's somewhat of a wash there, but a little bit favoring Kansas City's. And Kansas City just likes to throw the ball anyway. So I fully expect Kansas City to move the ball through the air. And if this is something where the Chargers are keeping pace and it turns out into a big shootout, Kansas City is going to be moving the ball through the air like crazy. So you're going to get your Patrick Mahomes, you're going to get Tyreek Hill, and you're going to get Travis Kelce. Those are the guys that are going to produce. They're going to eat up a lot of your budget, but if you can find some other plays throughout the week that give you a little leeway to run that up, I don't know how many people are actually going to run those 3 in combination, but they obviously have the ability to light up the world. It's something that you can try. Otherwise, Robinson or Mecole Hardman are the ones that would get you a little bit different. CEH as well. I mean, they do score a lot of points. He easily could find himself with a couple short yardage, either touchdown receptions or running one in. The Chargers, as I said, were 27th in the adjusted line yards on the ground, so you could find it a little bit easier sledding there. And CEH is almost like, with the vast amount of rostership that's going to happen in this game, CEH is definitely a way to get different. And if he plops himself into the end zone once or twice, he could be a nice play for you this week. And I want to say over on DraftKings, he's priced below some of these backup running backs, which is just absurd. So keep that in mind. Not somebody that I'm going to play in a cash game, but if you're looking to win a GPP, CEH definitely could get into a few of your lineups if you wanted points from this game, even as a one-off if you're potentially like just getting a receiver in there and then running it back with CEH and trying to hit up one of these other bigger total games for most of your other game stacks. So keep that in mind, especially in the GPP lineups. That's the number one, tie for number one actually on the slate with the Minnesota-Seattle game. So this is actually in Minnesota, 55.5 point over under. Seattle's actually favored by 2 points on the road here. So we're going to start with them. A very sneaky start that I like, and if you follow the Twitter account, you already saw me post out the early stats for this yesterday, but sneaky play here, Chris Carson. If we look at Seattle, they're sixth, so they're top six in offensive run blocking. Minnesota, 24th in the adjusted line yards. That's a green-red matchup in the favor of Seattle's run blocking. I could see Chris Carson easily having another monster game. He had 2 touchdowns against Tennessee. I could easily see him having another really good fantasy output here. And if people are going to be getting on these 55.5 point games, a lot of them are going to be going to the Chargers and Kansas City and then stacking Russell Wilson and Lockett or Metcalf. And that's going to be a lot of it. People don't really know what to do with Minnesota. A lot of their stuff funnels through Dalvin Cook, and he's kind of hurt, but as I was saying, like those Kansas City Chargers are going to be very high rostered this week, along with Seattle. I believe Russell Wilson and the pass catchers there are going to be very highly rostered. A way to get different, especially in GPP, but I would consider him even in a cash game, is Chris Carson. He's getting the volume, and the way that the adjusted line play is coming out here, it says he's kind of a smash play. So keep that in mind. He's not going to be very highly rostered this week, and I think I'm going to have him in quite a few lineups. With that being said, the offensive pass protection for Seattle, 27. Minnesota's pass rush, 2. I wouldn't expect Russell Wilson to have a lot of time, but if you remember, that's kind of what I said last week with the Tennessee matchup. Is Tennessee's pass rush, I believe, was top 10. Seattle was very poor on the offensive pass protection, and I said it's going to favor those shorter routes, and Lockett was the guy that ran like the shorter intermediate routes, while Metcalf runs more of the intermediate to deep routes, and we saw Lockett have another monster game. But who else had a good game last week? Freddie Swain. That's who we saw with the underneath routes. We could see more of the same, where it's a Chris Carson, Freddie Swain, Tyler Lockett type of game, and if Minnesota's defense truly is poor on that aspect, like Arizona carved them up pretty good, scored plenty of points there. I don't think Seattle's any worse of an offense, but I could see them keeping pace, and I like Chris Carson's chances of scoring at least once, if not twice, in this matchup. So Chris Carson for the Seattle side. Obviously, Russ is going to be under a lot of pressure. Last week we saw Swain and Lockett thrive under that same condition. So if you're going to stack that pass attack, either Russ with Lockett or Russ with Lockett and Swain would be a way to get different, especially on this slate with so many people in that Kansas City Chargers game. So let's move on to the Minnesota side of the ball. I really basically look at the defense here. We saw number 2 in pass rush. Seattle's 27th in the offensive pass protection. We've seen plenty of times in the past, Russell Wilson just taking sacks because the offensive line was so poor. He's running around back there. We could see more of the same in this game. I did say last week, get Minnesota against Kyler Murray. Even though he is a mobile quarterback, their offensive line was very poor. We saw Minnesota with a pick 6 there against Kyler. We could easily see strip sack of some sort with a fumble recovery for a touchdown. We could see multiple sacks, multiple fumbles from Russ in that regards if he's trying to keep pace if Minnesota's scoring on him. So that's the main play I have for Minnesota based off the adjusted line play report. But with that being said, it's a wash otherwise. So we look at their offensive run blocking, 18. Seattle's number 19 in the adjusted line yards for running. Minnesota's pass protection number 10, which is good, but Seattle also 13th at generating pass rush. So they're kind of a wash there, and as we found out throughout the year last year, these wash situations kind of just favor who normally scores the fantasy points for that team. So that's going to be Dalvin Cook and Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen for the most part. But if we know Dalvin Cook might not be 100%. He might not even play this week. If that's the case, I would expect them to try to move the ball through the air more so than on the ground, especially if Seattle's putting up points. This could be one of those Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson weeks, or Kirk Cousins and Thielen with Jefferson, one of those types of things. A way to get different, obviously, KJ Osborne we've seen have 2 really good weeks, so if you want to go that route, I don't blame you. It's just he's not going to be in a ton of my lineups, but I could see this game turning into a higher scoring affair, but Minnesota having to move the ball through the air because they have the backup running back in there following Dalvin Cook. So keep that in mind. Otherwise, if Dalvin Cook's in there, he could easily catch a few balls and have another 100 scrimmage yards against Seattle. Just he's the one that does most of the offense there, and the adjusted line play report is suggesting that he's the one that's going to be moving the ball for them if they actually do produce some points. So next on here at 55, that's actually the highest one from last year, or last week was 55 point total. This week, that's third on this slate. That's Tampa Bay at Los Angeles Rams. We actually have, did I put this right? We have Rams, Tampa Bay as 1 point road favorites. That is impressive. I don't know. These little values are a little bit weird. They're usually turned purple. At least they were last week. Anyway, we have Tampa Bay as 1 point road favorites over Los Angeles. And we'll start with them on the game here. So Tampa Bay, they're going to be able to run the ball easy. We see their offensive run blocking is number 1. That's green. Los Angeles Rams, despite being a really good defense, are number 23 in the adjusted line yards against the run. So that's another green-red matchup in the favor of Tampa Bay. Now, if I'm going to pick a Tampa Bay running back, especially in a high-scoring affair, it's going to be Fournette. The guy gets more pass work than Ronald Jones, and at this point, I think Ronald Jones is just too inconsistent and too turnover-prone to necessarily trust in DFS. So if we're going to be saying that Tampa Bay is running the ball pretty easy, it's going to be mostly a Leonard Fournette kind of week, and that's a way to get very different, I think, on this slate. A lot of people, they see Tampa Bay, they're just going to attack the pass game, especially if it's a high total. People are going to avoid the running back. So Fournette would be a really good way to get different. He's going to be low rostered. It's going to be cheap, and he may very well explode for, over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns or more in this game. So keep that in mind. They should be able to run the ball easy. Otherwise, pass protection for Tampa Bay is kind of a wash there. They're number 7 in pass protection, but the Rams are number 8 in generating pressure, so that's kind of a wash. As usual, if that's the case, you'd expect your normal producers to go. So that's Tom Brady, Gronkowski, Mike Evans, and Chris Godwin. Fortunately, we get a COVID restriction, so Antonio Brown unlikely to play this week on Sunday with being on the COVID list. It's not impossible for him to get there, but unlikely that he will. So target concentration to Gronk and Mike Evans and Godwin in this week. Bruce Arians is somebody who tends to throw the ball regardless. So I know Tampa Bay is a 1-23 matchup there in the run game. Not necessarily the style of Bruce Arians. So is he going to air the ball out or is he going to run the ball? Either way, there was plenty of times last year where they simply ran the ball all over people very efficiently. So it's kind of what you believe in, Bruce Arians or what this adjusted line play report is suggesting. So Fournette's just going to be one of those sneaky plays like Chris Carson. Maybe get those two in the same lineup and run it back with somebody like a Justin Jefferson and a Chris Godwin. Or excuse me, not Chris Godwin, but one of the Rams receivers. So let's get into those Rams. As I had mentioned, we look at them. They're number 5 in pass protection, and Tampa Bay, despite being a very good defense, is number 32 in generating any sort of pass rush on the quarterback. So they are the worst in the league at generating pressure against the quarterback. The Rams top 5 in offensive pass protection. If we expect Tampa Bay to put up a bunch of points, Los Angeles Rams definitely going to be able to keep pace through the air. That's going to be Matt Stafford this week. That's going to be Robert Woods. I actually like a little bit more than Cooper Kupp if he's got time. Cooper Kupp's been more of the underneath and playmaker. Woods, I think, would have a better game if he's got more time, as this would suggest. Also, a way to get different, you could get Van Jefferson or maybe even Deshaun Jackson if you want to get very different with somebody that's just like a less than a 1% or 2% rostered type of situation. Or Tyler Higbee at tight end there. So just keep that in mind. The run game's kind of neutral, even though they are third in run blocking. Tampa Bay is number 8 at stopping the run or against the run there with their defense. So expect Tampa Bay really to be able to move the ball efficiently on the ground and hold their own through the air, while the Rams just blaze through the air and kind of, hold their own on the ground. So I do expect this one to be a higher total. With Seattle blowing up last week with Tennessee and with the Chargers facing the Chiefs, I believe this game will come in a little bit lower rostered, especially on the Rams side. Nobody besides Cooper Kupp has been putting up monster weeks, and I could see people getting him this week instead of Robert Woods. So if I'm going to be playing GPP lineups, a lot of them are going to have Robert Woods over Kupp. If I'm grabbing just one person, if I'm not stacking this particular set with Stafford, I'm going to be getting a lot more Woods than Kupp. He is a lot cheaper as well, and I think he will actually outproduce Cooper Kupp this week, and he could be in line for a monster week. So keep that in mind as we dip into the number 4 game here, which is Arizona at Jacksonville. It's a 52-point matchup, so let's go find it here. Arizona at Jacksonville. 52-point total. We have Arizona as 7-point road favorites, actually. So we look at Arizona. What do they have? Basically nothing. They're number 8 in run blocking. Jacksonville, 12th in stopping the run. Arizona, number 21 in offensive pass protection. Jacksonville, number 19 at generating pass protection. So it's pretty much a wash for Arizona's offense. And when it's a wash, we just expect the people that normally score the points on their offense to score the points. If that's going to be the case, it's going to be Kyler Murray. It's going to be DeAndre Hopkins as the main guys. And then it's kind of your choice. Do you want Christian Kirk, who had a monster week 1? Do you want Rondale Moore, who had a monster week 2? Do you want AJ Green, who scored in week 2? Rondale Moore, I believe, is number 2 on their depth chart, and he is the most explosive out of those 3 other options. So if you're going to run a Kyler Murray stack with Hopkins and another one of your choosing, you could. Otherwise, if you want to fade Hopkins, it's a way to get different with Kyler Murray. Maybe do a Murray and pair Murray with either AJ Green and Rondale Moore, or like a Rondale Moore and Christian Kirk type stack. Then on the Jacksonville end, we actually see that their run blocking is a good matchup. So it's number 5, top 5 there for Jacksonville in run blocking. We see their pass protection is actually number 1. So their offensive line is producing really well through the first 2 weeks here. And we see Jacksonville run blocking at 5, Arizona number 17 at the adjusted line yards on defense for their stopping the run. So it's a green matchup versus one of the lower end, or not the lower end, but the mid-tier for Arizona. So I expect Jacksonville to be able to move the ball pretty efficiently on the ground. Just keep in mind that's going to be James Robinson, and annoyingly, it's going to be Carlos Hyde taking some of that volume away from him. And then on the pass protection side, it's kind of a wash. So you'd expect Jacksonville to be more efficient than they probably have in the last couple of weeks on the ground. And then also being able to move the ball okay against Arizona's defense there. So that's a number 1 versus number 4 matchup. That's a wash, as I had said. Jacksonville, we're looking at Shenault coming off of a shoulder injury of some sort. He might not get the type of volume or even play. But he might not get the type of volume that we were expecting when the season started, or even the last 2 weeks. That would lead a lot more volume to DJ Chark and Marvin Jones Jr. If it's going to be consolidated, those guys might not be bad plays. Just keep that in mind for that particular matchup. That Jacksonville's run game should be able to move the ball a little bit more efficiently, and then Arizona generates a lot of pass pass rush or pass pressure on the quarterback. Jacksonville's actually pretty stout at their pass protection offense, so there should be time for him to throw the ball regardless. Just keep that in mind. Now we'll head to the fifth highest point total here, and that's Baltimore at Detroit. It's going to be a dome game for Baltimore and Detroit there. We have 49.5 point Vegas total for the over-under. Baltimore actually 8-point road favorite, so it's even higher than what Arizona was on Jacksonville. And we'll start with the away team here, which is Baltimore. We look at their offensive line, run blocking 15 versus Detroit's red adjusted line yards defense. So that's a favor in the Baltimore category. So you're going to be looking at Tyson Williams or Latavius Murray there. Just the run game in general. You can also include Lamar Jackson within that. He could have a monster game here against Detroit. If we go to the pass protection, they're actually 19th, and Detroit's 6th at generating pressure on the quarterback. So that's pretty good. Might flush Lamar out of the pocket to run more. This is one of those rare cases, especially in a GPP, where I might run Lamar Jackson naked, where he's not matched up with any wide receivers, and I just hope he explodes for 120 to 150 rushing yards and a few rushing touchdowns, maybe passes for a couple others to some obscure players, and I hope that's enough to get me by and just smash some of those other wide receivers in the previously mentioned 3 games or 4 games there. So keep that in mind as a good GPP play, and Lamar also being maybe a good cash game option in this as well if you don't think the running backs are going to get all of the work there. So keep that in mind. On the Detroit end, we look, they're actually 15th in offensive pass protection, 9th in offensive run blocking, so the line's not too bad there in Detroit. Unfortunately for their run blocking defense, Baltimore is number 2 in the adjusted line yards, so that's a little bit of a mismatch in the favor of Baltimore's run defense on Detroit. Wouldn't expect them to be able to run the ball as well as they have the last 2 weeks. But the offense's pass protection is 15th in Detroit. Baltimore actually 24th at generating pressure against the quarterback. That's in favor of Detroit, so that might give Stafford a little bit more time to pass the ball. I'm not looking to stack him even in a game total of this 49.5. I'm not looking necessarily to stack Goff and receivers in any sort of cash or GPP. Don't think that's a wise option, but the pass catchers in Detroit, it's essentially Quintez Cephas at receiver, and then DeAndre Swift and TJ Hawkinson. Hawkinson's the main benefactor of having such a weak receiving core. He gets a lot of targets, and he scored, I believe, twice in the first 2 weeks. So keep that in mind. He is a tight end that is viable pretty much every week as a cheaper option compared to the Darren Wallers, Travis Kelce's of the world. And he's giving you very, very solid numbers. So I would expect him to have another big game against Baltimore here, especially if they're going to be scoring 3 touchdowns. I don't know who else is going to be scoring them besides Cephas, Swift, and Hawkinson. So keep that in mind. That's the Baltimore-Detroit game. Otherwise, there's nothing really there for the defensive end. Detroit is number 6 in generating a pass rush, as I said, and Baltimore 19th. That could lead to a few sacks for Detroit, but I don't know if I'm going to be wanting to play them necessarily on defense. Their cornerback just got injured, and they're bringing up guys from the practice squad, so that's probably an avoid for me. The next one that is kind of interesting is tied for 6th on the slate at 48 points. That's Atlanta at the New York Giants. This is one of those rare cases where there's just no benefit or no mismatch in any of these lineups. So we have Atlanta pass rush 20, New York Giants pass protection 25. That's within 5 of each other. Atlanta pass protection 20, New York Giants pass rush 28 or 29, excuse me. That's a little bit in the favor of Atlanta, but then the run blocking for Atlanta 22, the Giants 20th at stopping the run. Atlanta 26th against the run on defense, the Giants 31st in offensive run blocking. There's really a wash across the board. The best thing is maybe Atlanta's offensive pass protection against the Giants, so Atlanta might have a little bit easier time moving the ball through the air than on the ground, as this would suggest. That's probably their strong suit, so not necessarily looking to stack Matt Ryan with any of the pass catchers based off of this, but maybe a one-off with Ridley or Pitts there. And then on the Giants side, if it's going to be a wash, it's going to be the guys, again, that score the vast majority of their points. So Daniel Jones might have another big game in him. Potentially, if I have a lineup with him, I'm going to be running Slayton most likely. But also Barkley might be a very sneaky play. Atlanta has been really poor at stopping the running back from scoring points anyway in fantasy. So Barkley might be one of those guys where you're not going to find him cheaper than he is now for very many weeks in his career until he starts kind of falling off the ledge. And he could have just a monster game against Atlanta. I'm not saying that the run blocking at 31 is very good, but Atlanta's 26, so they might just be able to run the ball better than they're used to. He's got another game under his belt, 10 days rest. So Giants, or not 10 days, but another week's rest. So Barkley's one of those guys. He's going to come in low rostered and cheap. So in a GPP, he's certainly somebody that I am interested in, so keep that in mind. The other game that's tied for sixth in points at 48 is Indianapolis at Tennessee. And I forgot to say the Giants, they're 3-point favorites at home. But Indianapolis at Tennessee is the next one. I believe we are up higher here, so that's game 6 on the slate. And we'll go with the away team here first. Offensive pass protection, number 22 for Indy. Tennessee, number 9. That's a red-green matchup. So Indianapolis, I don't think Carson Wentz is going to play anyway. So Jacob Eason is going to be in there, which kind of limits the entire upside of this Indianapolis offense. Surprising that it's only a 5-point favorite for Indianapolis on the, or excuse me, that can't be right. Tennessee is not the underdog here. Wow, I must have screwed that up. Indianapolis has to be the underdog at Tennessee. Let's switch that up here. I can't do that. Cancel. Either way, 26.5-point implied total there for Tennessee. Indianapolis at 21.5. I would assume that they're going to score less than that, especially if Jacob Eason is playing. Then their run blocking is at number 14 and Tennessee at 22. Indianapolis might be able to run the ball on Tennessee, and if that's the case, Jonathan Taylor could have a little bit better game than he's used to. And if Jacob Eason is under duress, this is kind of also a benefit to Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines, as he's more likely to dump the ball off. Now, Jacob Eason is a mobile quarterback, so just keep that in mind. He's not a statue back there. He's all right at getting around, but I think we could see a lot of dump-offs to Nyheim Hines and Taylor within this matchup as well. I'm not really going to be targeting the wide receivers or the tight ends there at Indianapolis in any sort of DFS matchup. It's just Taylor as a GPP option, as a sneaky one, and maybe Hines if he's super cheap over on DraftKings as somebody that's going to get a few receptions potentially on this matchup. So keep that in mind on the Indianapolis side. Now we're going to go to the Tennessee side. The run game is going to be a little bit better here. So offensive pass protection is 29 for Tennessee, and Indianapolis 10th at generating a pass rush. I wouldn't expect Tennessee to have a very successful week throwing the ball, but their run blocking is 16th, exactly middle of the road. However, Indianapolis is number 32 in the adjusted line yards on defense, so that's the worst in the league. We just saw what Derrick Henry did to my week 2 DFS advice. He just stiff-armed it like it was an opponent and said, get out of here with that bunk advice. So Derrick Henry is probably going to be a pretty popular play just in general based off of what he did last week. That doesn't mean he's necessarily a bad play in cash. He's certainly viable in the GPP. Just know if he's a little bit higher rostered, you're going to have to get different elsewhere. And that's just kind of the case with him for GPPs. But you saw what he's capable of. He could certainly do it in back-to-back weeks, and then everybody's going to be freaking out about him. So keep that in mind. With that being said, Tennessee, 29th offensive pass protection. Expect them to kind of keep it underneath. And I said the same thing last week. Julio Jones was the benefactor of the shorter pass plays when there was a mismatch there for Tennessee anyway. So Julio Jones could have another week of success here, getting close to 100 yards, possibly a touchdown as well. So just let that sink in as you go. And now we're going to go onto my other page here. So this is the number 8 game, and this is where it starts kind of dropping off from 48 to 46 points, and that's Chicago at Cleveland, though this does have some good mismatches here. So we have Chicago at Cleveland, 46-point Vegas total, and we have Cleveland as 7-point home favorites. We're going to go into Chicago here. Offensive pass protection, 26. Offensive run blocking, 24. Both very poor. Offensive line play there is not good. But we see Cleveland, 25th at generating pass rush on defense. They've been pretty poor. They've had good matchups these first 2 weeks and just haven't produced anything as far as fantasy points are concerned. However, the Chicago run blocking being 24th, Cleveland's adjusted line yards on the run defense is number 9. That's a mismatch, significant mismatch, red-green matchup there for Cleveland in the favor of the run game. So don't expect David Montgomery to do much on the ground in this. I would expect Chicago, if they're going to do anything, to move the ball through the air. That being said, Andy Dalton's already been ruled out, so this is going to be Justin Fields' first start in the NFL. This is a way to get different. I don't know if you really want to risk taking Justin Fields naked in the GPP. That sounds very risky to me, especially with a total of 46 on here, but he could be one of those guys that just carries the team on his back, a couple rushing touchdowns, maybe one passing touchdown to, somebody that's low rostered like a Cole Kmet or Jimmy Graham or something. Just keep that in mind. However, let's just say he does get some time there because Cleveland hasn't been generating that much pressure on the quarterback. Allen Robinson and Mooney would be the guys that I'm targeting on that. Mooney's the one that's got the explosiveness and could take one to the house. Justin Fields has a very accurate and strong arm. I could see that being a good combination here, especially against Cleveland as they don't generate that much pressure. I could see them hooking up for a long bomb in this game. So if I'm going to be having Fields in there and it's going to be a stack, it's probably going to be Mooney that I'm leaning towards. However, I think there's a lot better wide receiver plays this week. Just keep that in mind. But Justin Fields is going to be starting there, and that's how they're going to have to move the ball is through the air. And Justin Fields obviously can run, so keep that in mind as well. On the Cleveland side, we look at their offensive pass protection. That's bad, 23rd. Chicago actually number 7 at generating pressure on the quarterback. Don't expect Cleveland to have a lot of time. That being said, they're number 2 in offensive run blocking. Chicago is 21st in the adjusted line yards on defense against the run. This is going to be a monster Chubb week and also likely a Kareem Hunt week as well. But Chubb, we saw him do well last week, 11 rushes, 95 yards, and a touchdown. He could easily see more volume, especially with the wide receiver core being decimated. Jarvis Landry's out for a few weeks. We don't know if OBJ is coming back or not. Regardless, they're not going to have a lot of time to pass the ball, and Cleveland's been dominating all the other teams in terms of targets to the tight end position. With that being said, if there's a quicker underneath route, it's probably going to be Austin Hooper, and it's probably going to be Harrison Bryant there, not David Njoku. He's more of an explosive mid-range to deeper type of tight end target for them. Don't expect him to have a big game, but if they're going to be passing the ball, I think a lot of it, especially if Odell Beckham's not there, is going to end up going to Harrison Bryant or Austin Hooper, but the vast majority of the damage is going to be done on the ground via Nick Chubb. So look for him to have a pretty solid week this week against Chicago's defense, and a way that you can get a stud into your lineup. Not a great total, but they are favored by 7, so they could be grinding the clock out. He gets more than 11 rushes in this game. Let's say he gets 18, still getting that elite efficiency on the ground. 18 rushes, 180 yards, and 2 touchdowns because he busts off a long one. Not out of the realm of possibilities there in Cleveland. Again, this is being recorded on Wednesday evening. A lot of this stuff could change, especially if weather comes into play or injuries throughout the week. Just keep that stuff in mind. Let's get on to the next part, which is tied for 9th is Washington at Buffalo, which is the game right below here at 45.5 point over under. Buffalo 9-point favorites over Washington. We'll start with Washington as they're the away squad. Number 3 in offensive pass protection, number 7 in offensive run blocking. Way to go, Washington. Your offensive line is very good. Unfortunately for you, you're playing Buffalo's defense, which is number 3 against the pass rush and number 4 in the adjusted line yards against the run. Kind of a wash there. Expect Washington to move the ball with their usual suspects. Wouldn't be taking the quarterback Heineke there, but if you want to run McLaurin or Gibson, probably not out of the question. If I'm going to do anything on Washington, it's most likely going to be McLaurin and nothing else. On the Buffalo side, we see the run blocking offense, 19, Washington number 10 against the run. Kind of favors Washington there over Buffalo's run game, so I'd expect Buffalo to try to move the ball through the air because they're number 12 in pass protection. Washington 15th at generating pass rush against the quarterback. They're going to have to move the ball through the air. That's going to be Josh Allen and Diggs. If you're going to be running that route, they're probably going to be low rostered this week compared to other weeks, and that could be in your favor, especially Washington's secondary is not that good. Josh Allen's very mobile. If he can get away from that very strong defensive front, he could find himself in line with Diggs for a big game this week, which could mean multiple touchdowns and multiple double-digit receptions and over 100 yards for Diggs. Just keep that in mind. His other pass catchers, Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders, are the ones that are getting most of the run there, so keep them in mind. But if I'm going to do a Josh Allen, it's probably just going to be Allen with Diggs and try to keep it concentrated and hope that Diggs has the big week, as there's not really very many other plays for Buffalo this week based off the adjusted line play report. So the next one that's tied for 9th is Miami at Las Vegas. This is an evening game. Or a late game, sorry. That's got a 45.5 point total as well. Las Vegas, 3.5 point favorites for Las Vegas at home there over Miami. Miami, Tua probably not going to play. If he does, he's injured anyway. Jacoby Brissett looked poor. And we look at here, Miami on offensive run blocking, 28. Las Vegas, 7th at stopping the run. Miami can't run the ball. We look at the pass protection. Miami, 30th. Las Vegas, middle of the road at 16. Miami can't run the ball. They can't pass the ball. They're not going to move the ball. They just got shut out by Buffalo last week. I would expect more of the same from Las Vegas's defense, even though it's not very good. It's improved drastically over last year, and that's not good for any Miami players. I'm pretty much not going to be taking any of these guys. Miami's quarterback's going to be under pressure, so your running backs and tight ends are probably going to get targeted a little bit more than usual. Will Fuller is coming back, but don't expect a lot of time for him to get down and do those routes that he is known for with Deshaun Watson in the past. So this is pretty much a complete fade for me. I'm not going to have anybody from Miami on any of my squads. Las Vegas is a defense, though, that I'm probably going to have a lot of exposure to in DFS this week, just because Miami's not going to put up a lot of points, and they could easily have quite a few turnovers against Vegas, as they're just inept on offense there. So on the Vegas side, on the offensive part, they can't run block. They're number 32. Miami's 15th at stopping the run, so Las Vegas isn't going to run. You see them be very unsuccessful with Josh Jacobs and Kenyon Drake there, just not moving the ball on the ground, but they're going to move the ball via the pass game. They're 16th in offensive pass protection. Miami, 30th at generating a pass rush, so you should have some time there. That might be another Henry Ruggs deep target where he gets beyond the cornerbacks there. But a lot of times it ends up just being Waller and sprinkled in elsewhere. So expect Waller to have another high target game as they don't move the ball very efficiently on the ground and end up just moving the ball through Waller and Edwards and Hunter Renfrow and Henry Ruggs. If I'm going to be targeting anyone out of here, it's Las Vegas defense, and maybe swinging Waller into a lineup or two to see if he can get some double-digit targets and a touchdown or two, hopefully. So that's the tie for 9th games. We'll move on to number 11, which is Cincinnati at Pittsburgh. 44.5 point total there. And we have Pittsburgh 3.5 point favorites at home. And with that being said, we'll start with Cincinnati. They're 32 in offensive pass protection, so worst in the league. Yet again, they were the same last year, although they couldn't run the ball last year. But they got Frank Pollard back. If you watched my video during the offseason on why I thought Joe Mixon was a screaming buy for dynasty purposes over the offseason, you can see Frank Pollard was a big reason of that. Well, their offensive run blocking is number 10. They're top 10 in the league now. They were bottom 3 pretty much the entire season last year. So they're not going to be able to protect Joe Burrow. It's going to lead to more underneath routes. All 3 of those receivers are capable, but Higgins is probably the most affected by having shorter routes. I expect them to be able to move the ball maybe slightly better on the ground, but Pittsburgh's number 3 in adjusted line yards on defense on the ground. So I think this is just going to be a slog fest anyway, one of those AFC North battles that just is black and blue, and they don't score a lot of points there in Cincinnati this week. For the Pittsburgh end, we look at their offensive pass protection 13th, Cincinnati 14th in generating pass pressure, so that's kind of a wash. Pittsburgh's run blocking 30th, Cincinnati top 6. They're number 6 in the defensive adjusted line yards against the run, so don't expect Pittsburgh to be able to run the ball very well. They're going to have to move the ball through the air. That's going to be the short routes anyway. It seems like Deontay Johnson might not play with the injury that he sustained on the last play last week. So expect Juju Smith-Schuster and Chase Claypool to garner most of that and then have Najee sprinkle in quite a few receptions there. So not sure what the price point is on Najee. He did score a touchdown last week, so he's probably priced up on both FanDuel and DraftKings compared to what he was last week, but he should still be a good play against Cincinnati, especially if this is going to be a closer game. I would expect him to get 5 or 6 targets again and, some decent run on the ground. I just don't expect him to be very efficient on the ground with that offensive line in front of him. And let's look at the last 2 games here, which are the most disgusting. They're the least total on the entire slate. So we have New Orleans at New England at 41.5. And then I believe it's an evening game. We have New York Jets at Denver, also at 41.5. So let's start with the New York Jets at Denver in the evening game or the late game. 41.5 point total. I only start here because the New York Jets are projected for 15.5 points because Denver are 10.5 point home favorites. And they're just going to smoke the Jets. Denver's defense definitely in play here, but let's start with the road team, New York Jets, 31st in offensive pass protection. Luckily for them, Denver's actually 27th at generating any sort of pressure against the quarterback. And their offensive run blocking is number 21, Denver number 11. Don't expect the Jets to do anything much on offense. They're on the road. Denver's a very difficult place to play, up in the altitude, crowd noise. I expect Jets at 15 points. That's kind of generous, to be honest. I don't think they're going to score very many points. We look at the Denver side. Could probably play their defense if you think the Jets are going to be struggling. We did see Mr. Turnover-prone Zack Wilson last week. A lot of people in the dynasty community and fantasy football community could see that coming from 1,000 miles away. Don't necessarily believe he is that talented, just kind of feasted on below average opponents in college, so keep that in mind. But on the offensive side for Denver, we're 17th in offensive pass protection. Jets are actually 12th against the rush. And then Denver, number 25 in run blocking offense. And the Jets, 14th in the adjusted line yards against the run. So what that suggests is that Denver doesn't really have an advantage anywhere, and they're actually kind of mismatched on their offensive line versus the Jets' defensive front there. So keep that in mind. This is just a 41.5 point total. You probably don't want pieces from any of this other than perhaps Denver's defense. And if you want to get cute, you can maybe get in Javonte Williams or a Melvin Gordon and hope to heck that they actually score a touchdown. But if you're in a GPP or cash, that's risky. GPP is risky, not something that I'd want to play. Cash, definitely risky, as I don't know, they need to score and it's a low total for that game. So I'm not looking at any pieces in there other than Denver's defense, as I had said before. Then let's go up to the New Orleans New England game. Again, 41.5 point total. New England 3-point favorites at home against the Saints. We'll start with the Saints there. 28th in offensive pass protection. The New England Patriots at number 5 at generating the pass rush. That's a red-green matchup. Look for New England's defense to completely obliterate Jameis Winston this week, which could lead to a massive amount of turnovers, pick sixes. New England might be one of those weeks where they score 25, 28 fantasy points and are one of the leading fantasy point getters in all of FanDuel. So keep that in mind. On the offensive run blocking side, we have the Saints at 17th, New England at 16th. Stopping the run, it just suggests to me that Kamara is going to be the only one of any fantasy relevance on the New Orleans squad, and it's not somebody that I'm looking to pump into my lineups that heavily, even though he kind of projects here to be the only way to move the ball against New England's defense. On the other side, we have New England. Again, this is the last matchup. New England, 18th in the pass protection. Saints actually 23rd in generating pass rush. Somewhat of a wash there. Favors New England a little bit. New England's run blocking offense, 23rd. New Orleans at stopping the run, 5th. Top 5. Don't expect New England to run the ball very efficiently. They're going to have to move the ball through the air, and that's not going to be like a huge total. Again, 41.5 points here. If I'm grabbing anyone, it's New England's defense, and it's pretty much no one else. That's it. I don't think I'm going to be playing any Jacoby Myers. I'm not going to be playing anyone on the run game. Just a crap game for DFS, all outside of the defense on those last two matchups. So keep that in mind, folks. Again, this is the Week 3 Adjusted Line Play Report presented by Zilla Fantasy Elite. I'm the host, Todd Hoffman. Subscribe to this YouTube channel if you like these DFS shows. Hopefully you have found good use from the last about 12 weeks of DFS that we have put out for this particular show. Very good corollary to winning and being able to predict these game environments and how it's going to play out as the year moves on. These stats from the adjusted line play report that I get from Football Outsiders only gets more and more accurate. So as the weeks go on, this just gets more and more accurate. We start winning more and more, and we get less and less like Week 2 DFS where Derrick Henry just slaps you across the face and makes everything sting. So subscribe to this channel if you want the latest DFS show when it comes out, and let's go win some money together, folks. Thanks. Bye.